Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Healing Outside the Box. My name is Jean Tiberio, and I'm a nutritionist and wellness coach. Today, I am bringing you episode 247. And since it's the end of the year, I thought this might be a good time to bring you a glimpse of the future when it comes to food. And one of the things in our future that is positive, in my opinion, is something called cultured meat. But first, I want to tell you about a huge study that was just published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, December 2020. This study involved 22,000 people, and the study itself is called a cohort study. Now, a cohort study in nutrition research is a study of a group of people with a similar characteristic. These people are chosen and then followed for many years. Exams and lab tests are done frequently while following these people. In this particular cohort study, 22,000 people were interviewed initially to get data regarding the use of ultra-processed foods. Then they were followed for years to look at their risk of developing all cardiovascular diseases, and then measuring their mortality rates at the end of the years. What they found is that if people had more than 16% ultra-processed foods in their diet, they suffered heart attacks and strokes at a much higher rate than those who ate less ultra-processed foods. Their death rates were higher as well. In other words, if they had a stroke, they were more likely to die from that stroke or be permanently in a vegetative state versus the people who ate less processed foods. This could be due in part to something called Metabolic Syndrome, which I discussed in a previous episode, and I'll put that in the show notes. Basically, Metabolic Syndrome is defined as having 3 or more of the following abnormal lab values, and it's usually centered around apple-shaped obesity, but it includes high fasting blood sugar, more than 100, hypertension, high cholesterol, and high triglycerides. But there may be other factors involved as well, something that's sometimes called a chronic inflammatory state. When they went back in the study and looked into the specifics of the ultra-processed food, the amount of sugar added to the food may have been more important than the fat content, but this again is theorized and not proven. But the common denominator here seems to be weight gain and insulin resistance. Now, this study is important for someone like myself because I feel that everyone, regardless of their income, or whether they're from a blue state or a red state, or the color of their skin, should have an equal right to affordable and attainable healthy food. And this I find particularly heartbreaking because the suffering could be preventable with the right education and priority at a national level. And this, quote, learn by doing education could start as early as the first grade. I encourage you all to think about this issue, maybe in terms of degrees of change for the better, rather than an all or nothing dramatic change in eating habits. We have a tendency to think all or nothing on January 1st when we're plotting our New Year's resolutions. I'll give you a link to that PubMed article in the show notes. And by all means, feel free to comment or ask questions on my website contact page, healingoutsidethebox.com. Okay, back to the topic of today's discussion, which is cultured meat. Now, you may have already heard about the Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat products. These are products made from plant-based proteins. There is usually soy protein included. It may say soy protein isolate on the label, but there may be other plant-based proteins in the product as well. For example, Impossible Meat does contain textured wheat protein and some potato protein. Some of these plant-based protein products also contain protein from peas. And what that means is that you're getting fiber in addition to the protein. The Beyond Meat product line contains protein from peas, mung beans, and fava beans. I know, every time I say the word fava beans, I think of the movie Silence of the Lambs. but it's a perfectly respectable bean. The coloring from this product comes from natural beet juice and apple juice. Now that is great. The problem with this brand is where the fat comes from. It comes from cocoa butter and coconut oil. Both of those sources have a decent amount of saturated fatty acids. The plant-based burger that Burger King put out recently also has a decent amount of sodium, and actually about the same amount of calories for the Whopper. Now there is a completely new game in town. I know this is going to sound scary, but scientists are now growing lab cultures from the cells of real chickens and producing something that looks very much like chicken breast or chicken legs. The difference with this product is that it is actually chicken and not plant protein that is formed to look like chicken. One way to look at this is that it is similar but not identical to cloning the chicken. You isolate specific cells from a real chicken and then grow them in the lab to produce what is called a cell line. The difference, and this is a huge difference, is that you are only producing the breast of the chicken from the chicken cells and not the entire bird. So it's a no-kill chicken that is actually chicken. The prototype now being made is actually mostly chicken. It also has some mung bean protein isolate added for texture. Mung beans, if you're not familiar with the term, are the beans that are used to make bean sprouts in Chinese food. The Guardian just wrote a detailed article on this cultured chicken, and I'll put that in the show notes as well. You get both the pros and cons in that article, which is good, because we want some transparency when we're venturing into the wild west of cultured meat. I first heard about this cultured chicken when I listened to a PBS radio program called Here and Now. I'll put a link in the show notes to this brief program. They were interviewing a guy named Josh Tetrick, who is the CEO of a company called Eat Just Inc., headquartered in San Francisco. In the past, they had developed a plant-based alternative to eggs, but their newest product is, as I've mentioned, actually chicken from real chicken cells that are grown out in the lab and then shaped to look like a chicken breast. So they allow the cells plucked from the chicken to grow with the nutrients that the chicken normally needs. So the cells are fed nutrients like amino acids, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, and minerals, just like us. In other words, the same type of nutrients that animals need to grow and multiply. The chicken cells and the nutrients are placed in something called a bioreactor, and they start growing at a rapid rate. I know when you hear bioreactor, you're probably thinking of nuclear reactor and the China syndrome, but it's not the same thing. If you're getting the heebie-jeebies, don't worry. You can watch somebody else eat the chicken first, and that somebody else is probably going to be me. So the result after they've been in this bioreactor is something they call, quote, good chicken, end quote. The final product has the same nutrients that we would get from a bird that we slaughtered, but without the bloody mess. Also without the antibiotics, preservatives, pathogens like Salmonella and E. coli, and the huge energy and water demands it takes to grow the entire animal and then slaughter it. And perhaps just as importantly to many of us, without the inhumane treatment, the cutting down of forests for grazing land, and the carbon dioxide and methane gases created from industrial farming. And as I remember saying when I ate my first batch of frog legs, it tastes just like chicken. In this case, because it's mostly chicken. This guy, Josh Tetrick, told PBS that the entire process takes about 14 days to get to the final cultured chicken. This is a lot shorter time than the 45 days from little chick to slaughter, not to mention the energy it takes from slaughter to the pretty cellophane-wrapped container. This good chicken has just been approved in Singapore, and Josh is working hard to get it approved here in the U.S. like everything else, it will probably start off being expensive until they can scale up the production and sell it for a profit. And I should say that the Singapore government did not slap their approval on this willy-nilly. They studied this product for about 2 years, hired a safety panel, and examined the process and the cell line from beginning to end. The FDA here may take some time to approve this product, although they have been regulating cultured seafood already. The cultured seafood is made with a similar process. I think the obvious stumbling block that this company faces is opposition from the meat producers. The U.S. Cattlemen's Association is already on this, as CNBC reported. The business people are estimating that in 10 years, the cell-produced meat market will grow to $140 billion. They also mentioned that these clean meat startup companies have started to get attention from investors like Bill Gates and Branson. Regardless of how uncomfortable the thought of growing meat in a lab may seem right now, the progress towards this technology seems inevitable, especially when it comes to beef cattle. We simply won't have the space to grow enough cattle to feed the 9 billion people that will be on Earth in the near future, because that's where the world population is heading. Not to mention the polluting of the atmosphere with the insanely large amount of cattle carcasses and other biowaste from the slaughter of billions of animals. So this is the future of food, folks. And as Martha Stewart likes to say, that's a good thing. That's all I have for you today. If you want to get notified when I have future episodes popping up, you can subscribe or follow on your favorite listening app. And if you would like nutrition counseling or health and wellness coaching, just email me on my website contact page. That's healingoutsidethebox.com, then click on Contact at the top. Be well and stay tuned next week for another episode of Healing Outside the Box.